Hi, I'm Don Huesman, Managing Director of Wharton Online at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Wharton Online is the school's key initiative in e-learning. We have over 100 courses, 10 professional specializations, all taught by tenured full Wharton faculty, and in use not just at Wharton and at Penn, but at over 500 colleges and universities worldwide. In the spring of 2020, as COVID was sending the whole world home to work, we noticed something interesting in our data dashboards for the Wharton Online courses. Basically, our registrations were booming. Then, to our surprise, about a year later, the boom in the interest in online learning began to fade just as quickly as it had sprouted in the first place. It raised a question for us about what might happen when the pandemic faded. Would our campus in 2022 look like our campus in 2019? Or had behavior changed permanently in some ways as a result of the pandemic? Researchers of Wharton have watched retailing, for example, as new technologies completely reshaped that industry. E-commerce systems were so fully integrated over time in the customer retail experience that it doesn't even make sense anymore to call it e-commerce. It's just commerce. So some of the Wharton faculty who researched the impact of technology on sectors of the economy expected the same thing to happen in education with e-learning systems. E-learning would be so fully integrated into education that we would ultimately just call it learning. However, some organizational psychologists of Wharton had an alternative analysis. They predicted that technology would not supplant in-person education, that we would see a return to the classroom just as soon as it was safe for people to gather in groups. And the reason for that was simple. We're mammals. For hundreds of thousands of years, we've been going shoulder to shoulder to the watering hole. We've been grooming each other. We've been taking the measure of our competitors by looking them eye to eye. If this analysis is right, then for those of us in the online learning business, we need to ask, how can technology support the kind of communication that humans as mammals so clearly desire? This was an early attempt by Wharton, working with Cisco, to address that question. To give you a sense of what's going on in this picture, the man at the front of the class is in Philadelphia, while all of the students in the room are in San Francisco. So we've used screen size, speaker placement, we've coordinated the room furniture and the colors to give the impression that everyone is together when they're actually a continent apart. The experiment showed promise, but the system didn't serve an important dynamic that's critical to the Wharton classroom: peer-to-peer interaction. In this case, peer-to-peer interaction was across local and remote students, and it wasn't handled very well by the technology. Fast forward about 10 years, and you'll see a more recent version of a technology like that we worked with Cisco, this one from Barco. They now offer the Hyflex classroom. Now, there's a couple of problems with this solution. It's beautiful, but an installation like this can cost millions of dollars to deploy. And secondly, the problem we saw of peer-to-peer interaction across local students and remote students is still there. So by comparison, take a look at peer-to-peer interaction as supported by the lowly discussion board. So here's one on a Wharton MOOC that's on Coursera. The cost of a deployment like this is virtually free, but does it add anything? Does it make any difference? Well, we looked at the data, and it turns out that it does. Even optional, largely unsupported peer interaction on an old-fashioned discussion board can make a real difference in learning outcomes. In our classes, we saw a significant correlation between voluntary interaction on discussion boards and learning outcomes like grades and completion rates. Now, the effect sizes were fairly modest, but they were stronger when interaction was required and when interaction was planned. At Wharton, we found it useful to think about investments in designing hybrid and Hyflex programs as positioned on 3 different scales. On the location scale, students can be co-located or distributed around the world. The time dimension of the programming can be either synchronous or asynchronous. And the knowledge being developed can be pre-created, like calculus or programming in R, or it can be co-created through Socratic dialogue, case discussions, interactive reasoning. If a program is designed for a globally distributed group of students who are working primarily in an asynchronous designed format program, then the question is, how do you support interaction given that context? So one way we've done it, as Morton, is we've worked with a survey company called Qualtrics to integrate Q&A surveys into a learning management system-based course to automate interaction in the flow of a set of course activities. We also worked with Canvas to use designs that would allow us to establish a module requiring students to review their profiles before doing anything else so that their colleagues would know more about them from the start. We've also included designs that begin a program of study with a single group peer-to-peer exercise to break the ice between the members of the cohort without burdening the program design with lots of group activities. Meanwhile, in designs that support busy executives who are widely distributed, but prefer to learn in a synchronous, co-created context, then you pull out your expensive Barco classroom. You just don't use a multi-million-dollar classroom to deliver a lecture on calculus. So what's the point? The point is the data. The idea is to develop a hypothesis that's either grounded in educational theory or in your own understanding of how you expect your ed tech project to improve the learning of your participants and your students. Then you put together a plan for stimulating interaction in that program. Then you make sure you're collecting data on learning outcomes. Those might include retention, completion, assessment, as well as satisfaction scores. Then try an A/B test if you can do it to see if you're right, and to see if an investment of your time and money in this project is worth it.